What's up guys, Kyle here again with another episode of FAQ'N Friday, where I answer all of your burning gear questions that you just have to have answered, and I'm your guy. Let's jump right into it. Question number 1 comes from Danny Eichelberger. What are your thoughts on the older quick rods, 2006-ish era with KT88s? I see a few around the $1,500 price range. The older Splawn quick rods are a little bit more aggressive. It doesn't really, the power tubes obviously make a difference, but there's inherent differences. There's a couple different eras of Splawn. So when Scott first started making his amps, he was using mercury magnetics transformers, and the amps were a little bit more aggressively voiced. They had a little bit more like upper mid cut like a standard Marshall would. Over the years, that kind of got rounded off a little bit, but we're talking by a minute amount. There's not a lot of difference between an older one and a newer one. Somewhere in the mid to late 2000s, he switched over to Habor transformers, and he used those for 5 or 6 years, I think. I'm not exactly sure when he switched again, but he ended up switching over to classic tone, and those are the ones that you find in the current production models. But classic tone with magnetic components has unfortunately closed their doors due to the current world situation, so Scott's currently sourcing replacement transformers. I'm not exactly sure who he has decided on yet, or if he has. I should actually ask him, but I know that he's looking for different transformers. But I have Splawns from pretty much every era. I've got two 2004s with the mercury magnetics transformers in them. I've got a quick rod and a nitro from 2010 that have the Habor transformers in them. Then I also have a newer competition that has the classic tone transformers in them. There are, again, slight differences between each, but if you were to record all three and throw them in a mix, I bet you'd have a really hard time picking out which one was which. The differences are very subtle. In the room, the older ones are a little bit more aggressive. That I would say that's it. And when I say aggressive, there's more of an upper mid spike in them, and it generally got a little bit more smoothed out as time went on based on customer requests to Scott. Me personally, I like the older ones better. Now, would I pay $1,500 for one? No, man. I would definitely try to find one a little bit closer to like the $1,100 to $1,200 range. There was a time, actually, when I first got into Splawn, 2017 and 2018, when their resale was terrible and you could find them for like $800 or $900 if you were diligent. But those days are kind of gone as the prices with everything else have gone up recently. So I'd say keep your eyes peeled. If you really want to have an older one and you're having a hard time finding one, grab it, but I don't think they're worth that much. But they are the ones that I tend to prefer. I tend to prefer the Habor and mercury magnetics transformer loaded ones, just because the voicing was a little bit different back then. The classic tone ones still sound amazing. They're just a tiny bit smoother in that upper mid section. All right, Gerald Rauch asks, hey Kyle, question for next week. What is your favorite recorded guitar tone? I have a tie. Metallica's Master of Puppets and Dream Theater's Images and Words. Thanks, man. That's really tough. I don't really... Man, yeah, sorry, man, that's tough. There's a few different examples I can list in different sorts of heavy music genres. Even in not heavy music genres, I don't pay attention to guitar tone as much. There's a band called Knuckle Puck that's like a pop punk band that I thought got really great, clean, and distorted tones on their first record. And I'm totally blanking on the name of the record right now, but their first record just had a phenomenal production for being a smaller band. So yeah, their guitar tones on there were awesome. As far as the heavy stuff, Kubla Khan on their full length with the song The Hammer on it. Again, I'm drawing a total blank. The production on that record is fantastic, and they used EVH 5153s on that record, and the guitar tone is just like my ideal down-tuned guitar tone. It's bright and crispy, but it's still very full and percussive. It's like perfectly balanced. It sits in the mix just right. So I love the guitar tone on that record. I also really dig the guitar tone on Buried Alive's Death of Your Perfect World. They use rectifiers, which is kind of funny, because I don't get along with rectifiers, but the tone on that record is just, it's MIDI, and it's not really sizzly, but it's kind of like clanky almost, and very punchy and percussive. Now the production with the bass tone and the drums has a lot to do with that, but that guitar tone is just, for me, one of the best articulate, somewhat dry, but yet still super heavy sounding guitar tones recorded. So final mention on that subject is going to be Terror, Always the Hard Way. I thought that had a really good, well-balanced guitar tone. It was thick, but it was still bright and cutting. In my opinion, I think that record has the best production out of anything that they've put out. It's very smooth and polished while still sounding pissed off like Terror does. And I really dig the guitar tones on that album. I think they did a great job on that one. So check those out if you want to hear my favorite recorded guitar tones. Thanks for the question, man. Luke Wilson asks, do you believe in big iron, 100 plus watts for a bigger sound, even if not cranking the amp? Example, triple rec guys swear by their 150 watt low end superiority over dual recs. No, not at all. And here's the thing. I'm not saying bigger transformers aren't good. They are. And it really depends on the engineering and design of them as well. Bigger transformer typically just means you're going to get more headroom, you're going to get more clarity and less. Again, it's all dependent upon how the amp is designed, and I'm not an expert in this, but in my personal journey of tone, I would say that no. I mean, I don't swear by big iron. The transformer has to be sufficient for the amp that it's powering. I will say that because I own a ton of 50 watt amps. I am actually a proponent of 50 watt amps. I tell people all the time, 50 watts is more than enough in today's day and age. If the power section of the amp is built correctly and it doesn't saturate the power section early and saturate the transformers and make everything kind of start to fall apart in the power section, then 50 watts is insanely loud. It's more than you'll ever need. A lot of people buy the 100 watt because of the headroom, and I get that. If I was tuning real low, like drop C is pretty much as low as I go, I would probably invest in something 100 watt transformers just for the extra headroom, because when you go down tunings, it tends to draw more from the transformer and saturate it more. So it's easier to kind of overload the power section in that case. But because I'm in standard or in D standard or drop C, you don't really need that. The only 50 watt amp I've come across that didn't have enough headroom once it got turned up was the Mesa single rectifier. Mesa single rectifier actually sounded awful when you would get it up to band volumes because it just started falling apart. And it wasn't just one, because Jason, my guitarist, had one as well, and he experienced the same thing. And now he's kind of like leery of 50 watt amps because that amp didn't have headroom. It just started falling apart once you started to crank it up to band volumes, and it just couldn't handle it. The power section wasn't beefy enough. Mesa's power sections, aren't all that great. Even Dave Friedman has said that like their 100 watt dual rectifier measures at like 80 watts, so their transformers aren't spec'd super high. The triple rec versus the dual rec, I've had both at the same time. I actually felt that the triple rec had less low end than the dual rec, and I have a Mesa Stiletto, and at 150 watts I have the Trident and then a 100 watt Deuce. The Trident has less low end, and I think the issue with it is you really can't get the power section where you need it to be with that much wattage and that many tubes in order to really start pushing the power section to like kind of get it coming alive. This is all theoretical. I'm talking basically out of my ass and just out of personal experience. So if I'm wrong, guys, feel free to actually correct me and provide some evidence. I'm totally fine with being, told I'm incorrect here. But my perception has been the 150 watt Mesas are kind of hard to get the low end out of versus the 100 watt Mesas, because the 100 watt Mesas, the power section kind of comes into play a little bit earlier. And if you've ever owned Mesa amps, you know that pretty much all of them have this weird spot on the dial of the volume where the amp just kind of like turns into this whole other thing. It's like the volume makes the amp just completely morph. There's more mids, it sounds broader, but for the most part, you can't get the amp to that point. On the 100 watts, you can get right around there, but on the 150 watts, you have to be insanely loud, and you're gonna piss off everybody that you're playing around to get to that point. So I noticed that the low end was actually significantly less on the 150 watt models than it was on the 100 watt models, and I think that that's why. If the transformer is built well, like Wizard and Soldano, I mean, those amps are kind of known for the magic being in the transformers of those amps. that's kind of different. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily that they're these huge big iron transformers. It's just in the design, and the design interacts with the amp in a way that creates this awesome bloom, or, you know, that's kind of what everybody touts. I can't speak for myself because I've never played an SLO or a Wizard, but everybody says that they have this unreal bloom that you don't really get out of any other amp. You don't get out of the clones, and it comes from the transformers. Again, I don't know if that's true or not, but that seems to be what people who I trust say. So take that as you will. Cap Inc. asks, what are things to look for when buying a used amp? First things first, try it if you're sketchy. I mean, I would always recommend trying it out just in case if you ever have the chance. If you're buying locally, go there, turn it on, let them let you play through it. Check all the pots to make sure that they're not scratchy or that some of them are, you know, not functioning properly. Check every pot, go through it, just hit a chord, turn every pot. If they're scratchy, not a huge deal. That could be a talking point of negotiations, but overall pots get dirty. Once they get older, they'll get scratchy. So just make sure that they all work properly the way that they're supposed to. When you get to the back of the amp, make sure every tube is lit, because believe it or not, tube amps will still work if, say, you've got a 100-watt tube amp with 4 power tubes. If one of those power tubes isn't lit or something's wrong with it, you can't always visibly tell, but if it's not lit, it may still work fine. So you may fire that amp up and it sounds okay through the speakers, but one of the power tubes is bad. Preamp tubes, not as big of a deal. Some of the preamp tubes don't really light up all that much, or they're covered, so you won't really be able to tell, but just make sure that the power tubes are lit. Make sure if there's 4 power tubes or even 2 that they're matched, they're the same brand, same type. Try to make sure that they're the same age. I would also plug something into the effects loop if it has an effects loop to make sure the effects loop works and doesn't cut out or drop your volume significantly or anything like that. But yeah, that's really about it. I mean, mainly just turning it on, playing it, making sure it sounds healthy and that all the pots work as they're intended to would be my first step. Checking the tubes on the back. There's a lot that can go wrong with tubes and they won't really show signs of it visibly. So you're probably not going to be able to figure that out on the spot, but if one isn't lit, that's a surefire sign that something's wrong there. Could also be a point of negotiation or a sign that you should walk away. So those would be my tips. Dan Vizina asks, what are your thoughts on the PRS Archon? I actually really dig the Archon. I have a 50 and a 100. I got the 100 in a couple weeks ago so I can do some videos and shootouts with the 50 and everything. They're almost a little too smooth for me, but if you really crank up the mids and use the right pedal, you can kind of bring them alive and break that smoothness a little bit. The low end is big and tight. They have a big low mid voicing. I always tell people it's like kind of a rectifier voicing, but with a 5150 feel. There's that fluidity and compression from a 5150, but there is that low mid kind of roar and big low end from the rectifier, but it's tighter. It's like a combination of the good parts of 2 of those amps. I think it's a really cool amp. I always tell people it's kind of like a more modern and refined rectifier with a tighter low end and a more fluid feel. So I know a few people have agreed with me on that. Some have disagreed, and that's fine, but that's how I kind of take it when I play it. I think it sounds really good. I think it sits in a mix well. It complements other amps well, so I think they're an awesome amp, and they have tons of gain, great clean channel. The only thing is, they're a little expensive for what they are. I know that they're made in the USA. That's great, but I literally just sold a 100 watt for $1,500. And to me, it's not a $1,500 amp. It's like a $800 amp, honestly. And they don't really go for that. The 50 watts were going for that for a while, but the prices have gone up with everything else. So you're lucky to find either of them under $1,000. I just don't think that there's anything that super special about them that warrants that price tag. So I would probably look for something else in that price range. But luckily for me, I got good deals on both of mine. So that's my take. There are other things that I would pay $1,500 for way before a PRS Archon, but they are awesome amps. David Ross asks, have you entered Mosh retirement? And if so, what would it take to set you off? I haven't officially declared Mosh retirement, but it's been a long time since I have, mainly because there hasn't been shows for a year and a half. But on top of that, yeah, I still love going to shows and playing shows. It's like my favorite thing in the world. I just love the community around it all and the vibe that you get at shows and live music. It's just That's one of the reasons that I still play in bands all the time, is because I get to be in that environment a lot more often, being in bands, and also I enjoy making music. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've hit the pit. I can't remember the last time, to be completely honest. It's been a while, but Buried Alive covers will do it. Certain Hunter Demons and Death Threat covers will do it. Stigmata, if you played a Stigmata song, that would probably do it. But other than that, oh, one last mention, Terror, Nothing to Me. That song would make me lose my mind, because Lowest of the Low is one of my favorite albums, and I've never gotten to see them play that song live, and that's my favorite Terror song. So I've actually asked Scott a couple times if they were going to play that song live again, and he said he wants to work in more of the new material. This was at the time that Keepers of the Faith was coming out and huge, so they were trying to play most of the material off that record and only mix in a couple older songs. So I'm kind of hoping maybe one day I'll get the chance to see him play that song, but that song makes me lose it. Even in the car when I'm listening to it at the gym, that song just fires me up. So yeah, Terror, Nothing to Me. If I can ever see that live, I will surely come out of Mosh retirement. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me this week. I really appreciate your guys' questions, seriously. Look forward to doing this video every single week. The suggestion of the week, I'm going to use this platform to promote my band that I play drums for, Subdue. We are a 5-piece hardcore band, and I would say our two biggest influences would be Buried Alive, of course, because pretty much everything I do is influenced by Buried Alive, but also Suburban Scum was a big influence. We really dug Suburban Scum, and kind of wanted to do something in that same vein. It's heavy stuff. My drumming is not the best on that, because I've been playing for less than a year when we recorded that EP, but I still think that the songs are awesome. We're currently working on new stuff. We've got 2 new songs written. We're gonna bang out a couple more and do a second EP here sometime, probably hopefully in the summer. We've been practicing weekly again for the first time in a long time, so really appreciate it if you guys would go check out our EP, Death's Cold Hands. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We would really appreciate it. Also, down in the description of this video, that is where my Patreon is and my Amazon affiliate link. So if you guys feel like helping out the channel and helping me make more content, my dog's going crazy in the background here, I'd really appreciate it if you went down, checked out my Patreon, clicked on the Amazon associate links. I also have links for awesome builders in the business, such as Voodoo Custom Pickups, Deadweald Audio, people that make products that I really enjoy and really feel like they deserve a shout out.